Workbox, down to earth, down to business.
It is 8:33, 98.7 WFGR, 27 degrees outside right now. Andy and Dave, and we've got Todd Harcek, who is a local political analyst here in this morning. Todd, thanks again for coming in.
My pleasure.
Looks, yeah, and he was telling us about some TV station that was trying to get him in.
Yeah,
and he's like,
I don't want to drive
it started
that far.
off as a favor for a friend, and now I don't want to do it. And so next year.
Yeah.
Next election comes along,
yeah.
he's going to say the same thing about us.
Oh, God.
Now, okay, we talked about presidential politics
That's
a little
right.
bit. Now I want to get Todd's take on some of the Michigan issues
Right.
that we're facing in these proposals. Proposal 1, it expands the powers of these emergency managers that we've seen around the state, especially Benton Harbor had their entire city council dissolved by one of these emergency managers. Muskegon Heights had the whole school board dissolved
Right.
and taken over all that kind of stuff. What's the feeling on this, and do you think it's going to pass?
I don't know if it's going to pass or not. I think if people wade through it, then they would understand. It's already current law, and this actually would revoke it. I'm sure
Voting yes would revoke it. Or voting no.
Voting no revokes it.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Yes affirms it. What has happened in the state, and it happened when I was working with the legislature as well, is local municipalities and school districts get in financial trouble.
Yep.
And the state ends up having to bail them out one way or the other.
Yep.
And so Governor Schneider and the legislature expanded the powers to take over these municipalities, get them in order, and then kind of turn them back over. There's two sides of it. The anti-takeover side is that you're dissolving elected officials, democratically elected officials that should be able to decide for themselves. The other side of that is, well, the legislature creates all local districts, and, they're in trouble. And the only way you can actually get them out of the financial mess is to not have to deal with the local politics, which often involve union contracts.
Sure.
And so if the state can come in and is not bound by these contracts or other things, they can come in and kind of be the bad guy, so to speak, and just take it over, get their finances in order, and then kind of ease it back into what it was.
Right. So a yes vote says that you think it's a good idea that the government can do that.
Yes. I mean, you're going to have to bail them out one way or the
Right,
other.
right,
So,
right.
And isn't Benton Harbor, isn't that a perfect example of some place that needs that? Because, I mean, it's a joke. I mean, the local politics over there is a joke, isn't it? Bottom line. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, they get themselves in trouble. Muskegon Heights that you raise is an interesting one because they actually requested state intervention.
Right, they needed it.
Right.
And so
And it's not the city it was the schools.
It's the school districts, right.
Okay.
Yeah, they get themselves in these troubles. And if you look at Detroit, who actually has done a pretty good job working with the governor,
Yep.
and I was involved when we had to take over Detroit schools. And I can just say this. Nobody wants to do that. I mean, the state has their own problems.
Right.
The last thing you really want to do is to have to step in there. But sometimes it's necessary to go in and do the things that the locals are either unable or unwilling to do.
Sure.
But it's a mess, and it's charged, especially when you deal with cities that have large minority populations. You kind of get that where they think it's someone coming in to take away their rights,
Right.
et cetera. And then that becomes a little dicey.
Did you realize what he just said? Large minority populations.
What does that mean?
That would make them not the minority
Right.
anymore, wouldn't
Exactly.
it? I mean,
If
whoever
they're
you're
a
talking
large
about.
if they're a large minority population, where's the... Okay.
All right, proposal 2. All right, making collective bargaining a right for public and private workers. Is this thing going to pass? Is it going to... What do you think?
This one could. I mean, what's interesting about these ballot initiatives is the more confusion, the more it's likely that people just vote no on all of them.
Right.
And so one could sink the other one. This one obviously has strong union support,
Yep.
and that's one of the reasons it's on there. It's there's no push at this point in the state to do anything with collective bargaining. I mean, Governor Schneider's made that clear that they don't want that fight. But the unions have seen with the attempts and successful attempts in Wisconsin, unsuccessful in Ohio. They're a little defensive. When this is on the ballot, of course, it's going to increase turnout for traditionally Democratic, groups and people. So, there's a political issue involved with this being on the ballot as well.
Haven't you seen kind of a backlash against unions pretty much all over the place, but in Michigan in particular, especially with the whole auto bailout? And
you're seeing a little bit of it. And here's where I do think some of the union folks have maybe misjudged the public. When you have such high unemployment with a number of people looking for jobs, it will kind of put some people off that you're
when you're,
it appears as though you're trying to keep what you have, and that's publicly funded.
Right.
When a lot of people would be happy with half of that,
Yeah.
and so there's a little bit of a rub there.
when you're bitching about having to pay for some of your health care and stuff like that.
Yeah, and if you've got a pretty good deal already,
Right.
and again, taxpayers are funding it, it's hard for some taxpayers that are really struggling to say, well, I should either cough up more money or businesses for that, and so this is a big issue though, but the unions have in a way they're all in on this one. I mean, this is a big deal, and if it goes down, it's going to be a big black eye for them, and so that's why they're pushing so hard.
Boy, all right. Number 3, the mandate that 25% of the state's electricity comes from renewable resources by 2025.
Right.
Think they're gonna go for this one?
All windmills. It's all wind power now.
I suspect this one goes down. I mean, that's just kind of my women's intuition on this. It's kind of I've referred to it as the field of dreams proposals, where if you just mandate it, then suddenly in 2025 we're going to have 25% of our
renewable.
Right. The problem is the technology for renewables isn't really there yet. Maybe it'll be there in 2020, 25. But the other thing is the cost is quite high, and sooner or later we're going to pay for it. And so while it may be a good idea, with all of these, the key issue is, does it belong in Michigan's Constitution? Not just is it a good idea.
Right.
And some of these just, very well might be, but should we amend our Constitution to do these things? And this one is a bit problematic, I think, just in terms of it's going in the Constitution, and how many other ideas are we going to have, and we're going to throw in the Constitution?
I think that kind of stinks too. I don't think this belongs in the Constitution.
Right.
So I would want to vote no.
Right.
Well,
not that you're telling people how to vote.
Right?
I'm saying how I would like to vote.
Yeah.
If I don't think it should be in the Constitution, I say no to 3.
Yeah, the only one that's not a constitutional amendment is Proposal 1.
Okay.
That's more of a referendum. So,
and those are harder to get. I mean, when you're talking about amending a state constitution, those are harder to get passed.
Well, I mean, actually, if you can't get it through the legislature, you go to the Constitution.
Okay.
And what they're doing now is, which, you could argue both is democratic, but also bypasses our elected officials. Because if you can't get it through the elected officials, if you've got enough money, you hire people to put signatures on the and get it on the ballot, and then do an ad campaign, and you kind of do the end around. There is a legitimate argument as to whether our Constitution is too easily amended by these referendums.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the case. I don't think I think it's a great idea. I think it's something people ought to do. But do we need to write it?
You write it in there saying this has to be law.
Well, and it's hard to get out.
Yeah.
I mean,
once it's in, you can't. Yeah.
All right, home health care workers with a limited collective bargaining right on Proposal 4. That seems fair to me. I mean, if they're home health care workers, shouldn't they have a voice too?
This one has a legitimate chance of passing because of how it sounds. But when you look at it, it is actually not going to help home health care workers.
How so?
Well, they make an average of $8 an hour or so, approximately in Michigan. All of this that this proposal seeks to do is actually either already in statute or can be done through the legislature. This is, at least critics argue, this is a carve-out from a union to increase membership. So there's disability advocates in Grand Rapids have actually come out against this because it doesn't do anything to improve home health care. I mean, it does have the background checks, et cetera, but that's already available.
Wow.
They kind of view this, at least from their public comments, as a union grab. So, really you're forcing these home health care workers to pay dues. There hasn't been this huge cry from home health care workers that we need to unionize, and there's nothing that prevents them from doing so right now. So this one is an interesting one because it's got all the great marketing aspects. I mean, who doesn't want to take care of grandma and make sure that these people are safe? But when you dig a little bit deeper, the motives behind it are at least
questionable.
A little bit questionable.
All right. And now the next one, 5, which I've really paid no attention to at all, would require increase in state taxes to be approved by 2/3 majority in the legislature or statewide vote.
Yeah.
Which, you know what? Okay. I'd like to have a say-so if I'm going to get taxed higher.
Right, no question.
Wouldn't you?
Would I? Well, yeah.
What are the ins and outs on this
Yeah.
one, Todd?
Well, it's funny on this one because I actually know the guy that's running the campaign. I started interning with him 20-some years ago, and so I've seen his face about 20 times this weekend from my mailbox. The pros of this is this particular one is extremely difficult now to raise taxes. You know, 2/3 majority of it, and it would prevent any tax increases. A lot of people argue this is a response to proposals to raise the gas tax. So this would stop that. The negatives are, having worked for the legislature for a long time, if you can get 51%, sometimes that is a grueling fight on anything.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just it's just grueling. I can't even begin to describe it and getting flashbacks. So if something comes along, you'll never get 2/3. You'll never get 2/3. And so the downside of that is really, when you really think about it, is the fact that if something happens, that you need to raise funds, let's say healthcare is turned over to the states or something along those lines, and rather than 2,000 a family, you can do it for 500. You'll never get that passed. And so if there is some situation in the legislature that requires taxes, then you'll have to make cuts. And really, the only places you can make cuts in the state budget are the big areas, which are education, corrections.
And nobody wants to cut any of those.
No, but they'll be forced to if this goes through. And so the interesting part about this is the opponents of this are the Michigan Chamber of Commerce and other liberal groups. And I've never seen them on the same side of virtually anything.
Right.
And you look at other states, California, once you start putting this in the Constitution, then you have some real issues. And California is starting to reap what they sow, because they've got a number of these things in their Constitution. So this one could be quite problematic. And it's not that I'm a supporter of taxes at all or increasing, et cetera. It's just I know that this effectively takes the decisions out of the legislature, and the consequences are things that people need to at least consider before they vote on this one way or the other.
Okay. And then finally, Proposal 6, which somebody called us about the other day.
Yeah, we did. We had no idea what it was.
We asked her to explain 1 through 5 before we gave her.
She get
I don't know nothing about none of them things.
I don't want.
But now this is voters to approve any new bridge or tunnel from the United States to Canada.
Yeah.
This is
you know what?
controversial.
Let me just say this. To me, this one in the West Michigan side of things, who cares?
Yeah.
Because this just seems like a big fight for two rich guys in Detroit who want to, it's just ridiculous.
It is a little bit, yeah. Manny Maroon owns the Ambassador Bridge, and his family. He's a very wealthy man. This is not a new issue of whether we need a bridge to Canada. I think really it boils down to he doesn't want the competition. And it's a smart business move. He has the right to do that. But it does, Canada's willing to foot the bill for just about every part of the bridge.
Yeah, but they're paying in Canadian money, which is essentially monopoly money, isn't it?
Thank you, Dave, for that wonderful comic interjection. Back to you, Todd. Thank you.
It is, and they'll pay for it. They'll get the toll money from the bridge. I guess my view on this is I don't think there's going to be a huge cost to the state. I think that there will be some, and so for people to say it's free is probably not true. But this is an unbelievable deal if Canada's going to foot that bill.
And you would think, with our friend Dave over here, our mutual friend.
I've never been to Canada, by the way.
And his love of strippers and duty-free liquor stores, he'd be on his way to Canada every other week.
All that's missing is the bridge. That's what's keeping me from going to Canada. Whatever.
But this one is also interesting because the rumor is that the proponents of this have cut a deal on collective bargaining.
Really?
To not oppose that if they didn't get opposed on this one. And so this is where kind of the darker, grayer areas of politics seem to come together. At least that's the rumor on it. This is kind of one of those silly political fights. I don't think, regardless of what happens with it, I think the state can still proceed because it's an international bridge. But just in my opinion, I mean, we were talking about building the bridge and Michigan funding it as far back as 2000. And because of this stuff, we stopped. Well, now the deal's gotten sweeter for Michigan.
Is it needed for commerce?
Right.
I honestly think, not being an expert, of course, the bridge people right now, the Ambassador Bridge folks would argue no, traffic's down, etc. But there's been a lot of complaints about bottlenecks at the Ambassador Bridge and down by Windsor. Canada is our biggest trading partner. Now, I'm not really shilling for this, but I'm just trying to describe it, that it does open up quite a few more options for trucks and business and tourists.
Okay. All right. Before we wrap things up, we got Todd Harcek in here who's talking about politics and the big vote tomorrow and all that kind of stuff. Why don't you go ahead, and tell us
who's going to win.
Your little odds thing that you have going on here.
Well, some of the best political analysts have said that only a fool or a liar would predict something like that. And I'm thinking, well, that's right up my alley. So I'll give you the pundit money odds is that I would probably lay the odds just by what the public says, Obama -4 electoral votes, meaning Obama is favored.
Essentially 272 to 268, something like that.
Right. And I think that's probably the best odds you could lay on this. I am getting a sense that there is quite a bit of a groundswell for Romney, and
really?
So hopefully it's not close. I mean, one way or the other. Right. Hopefully we don't have to deal with recounts and other things.
Who do you think is going to win this? And before you answer that, do you think we could have a repeat of 2000 where, say, Obama wins in the Electoral College and Romney wins the popular vote?
People have said that. I honestly think if Romney wins the popular vote by anything more than 1% or 2%, I think that carries him through, to be honest. I really do, yeah. Because the popular vote in the states favors Democrats by about 2%.
Okay.
So if Romney carries the popular vote, it's hard for me to see a scenario where he doesn't also garner enough electoral votes. And I just think that there's this unhidden and unpolled wave of folks that either don't like what President Obama has done or are now Romney supporters and might show up. And this is one of the toughest ones to call, to be honest with you. But right. I think
who are you picking? You're saying it could, but who are you picking? You're not a fence sitter, man. Come on, who is going to win this?
Well, since nobody's going to remember this interview and call me out on it, I'll go with Romney by 2%.
Really?
All right. There you go. Yeah. So I guess we're going to go even money. I'll take Romney.
I'm not betting.
You're not betting me
on
this?
No, I'm not betting on this one. I never said I'd bet on this one.
Oh my God, you wussed out.
No, I never said I would bet on this one.
That was the whole point of having him coming in here was to handicap this to see if we could get.
You see, I thought the whole point was in here so he could come in and explain to the listeners who've been trying to rifle through all the BS and everything else that's been going on for the last year.
That was a minor side
never mind
point.
that point. Duh.
I can't believe you.
He wants you in here to gamble. Yeah. Can you believe that?
I believe it. I believe it. I'm sure we'll be making a bet on it.
We bet on everything else anyway. So,
hey, Todd Harcek, thanks so much for stopping in today and shining some light on some of this stuff. Because I'll be honest with you, I appreciate the opinion. Mm-hmm. I have been so distant from all of this stuff, and guiltily so.
Right.
I have removed myself from all of this fight because I just can't be a part of it. It's just ridiculous.
And I've been very, very opinionated, even though I have no idea what I'm talking about most of the time.
Todd
so it's just like I said, just throwing verbal feces around the cage. Right. That's what we do.
Todd, the door's open if you want to come back, man.
My pleasure.
All right, Todd Harcek right here, 98.7 WFGR.